My job at a manufacturing firm provided the most stability in my life. Yet, small, seemingly insignificant moments reminded me how quickly time was passing. I caught myself thinking, has it really been a year? As I sent out a letter, life was moving faster than I realized. My role as purchasing manager placed me in charge of about a third of our 175 employees. I'd been with the company for 6 years, and lately, people had started noticing my contributions, calling me a rising star. Long hours were part of the deal. Starting before sunrise and rarely finishing before 7:30 p.m., work had become the cornerstone of my existence. On this particular day, the end-of-month tasks kept me busy, double-checking inventory, rescheduling 2 shipments, and ensuring all shop orders were completed. As I wrapped up, my boss, Mark, stopped by my desk on his way out. "What are you still doing here, James? Go home and enjoy your weekend," he said with a grin. "I just need to wrap up a few things," I replied. "Seriously, the office is closed tomorrow for fumigation. Take a break." Mark insisted as he left. I stayed a bit longer, finally clocking out after 8 p.m. On my walk home, I passed by restaurants and bars bustling with couples enjoying their evenings. I went straight to the fridge, grabbed an open bottle of my favorite red wine, uncorked it, and poured a glass into one of my crystal goblets. Wine in hand, I flipped on the TV and opened my laptop. AOL notified me of 6 new emails, 2 from eBay, 2 from my parents, 1 from my friend Ryan, and the usual spam about making easy money from home. "I'll deal with it tomorrow," I thought as I headed to the kitchen. My kitchen was a point of pride. One of the first things I renovated after moving in. It looked like something out of a gourmet magazine. The next morning, I sent an email to Ryan, my friend. "If Dana hasn't convinced you to sell your bike, meet me for breakfast at 8 o'clock Sunday at the diner on Route 321. Riding my Harley was my therapy. I'd driven sports cars before, but they couldn't compete with the raw freedom I felt on my bike. The rumble of the engine, the wind rushing past, and the vulnerability. It was an adrenaline rush I craved. I'd stopped wearing a helmet months ago, opting for just sunglasses and sometimes a cap. By 9:30 a.m. Saturday, I hit the open road. Only one other biker passed me, flashing the classic 2-finger peace sign. Most casual riders had already stored their bikes for the winter, but the hardcore ones like me waited until the snow forced us to stop. My Harley needed an oil change, so I swung by the dealership. "Just an oil change," I told the tech, who estimated it would take about an hour. While waiting, I browsed the showroom, my eyes landing on a lime green custom chopper. I couldn't resist swinging a leg over it, admiring the sleek design. A salesman approached. "Sweet ride," I said. 2008 engine, just 2,200 miles, mostly custom Harley parts, he replied. "Want to take it for a test ride?" "I probably can't afford it," I admitted. But when he mentioned the owner was open to trades, I told him about my 2008 Ultra. Before I knew it, I was cruising down the road on the chopper, the wind in my face and the vibrations under me. It handled like a dream, though the hardtail made for a rougher ride. I returned to the dealership, telling the salesman, "A bit more vibration than I'd like, but it's solid." He offered to connect me with the owner, who explained over the phone that his wife hated the rear fender pad, so they needed something more comfortable. "I made that mistake once. Never again," I joked. "Got any saddlebags for it?" "Yeah, and a small bolt-on windshield if you're interested," he said. Within 45 minutes, we struck a deal. For $8,800 and my trade-in. I rode off on the chopper while they left with my Ultra. Definitely a win-win. I scheduled an appointment to upgrade the seat and add a rear shock. I quickly realized my back couldn't handle the hardtail for long. The next morning, I met Ryan at the diner. He was already there, sipping coffee. "When'd you get this beauty?" he asked, walking around my new bike. "Yesterday. Traded my Ultra for it. What do you think?" "Damn, it's awesome," he said, spending the next 20 minutes marveling at it. If I brought this home, Dana would kill me. Over breakfast, we caught up. Business had been slow for me due to the economy, but I told him we were set for a strong fourth quarter after locking in some new distributors. Ryan's company wasn't as fortunate. They'd laid off 10% of their staff and were barely avoiding bankruptcy. "I never thought I'd be happy just to have a job," he said. "I keep telling the guys they should be grateful they're still working." We shifted topics to lighter things, like Lisa's job at the hospital. Her job's secure, but she's so exhausted sometimes, I have to pick her up at 3 a.m. because she can't drive home, he said. Ryan hesitated before adding, Lisa and Taylor still talk, you know? Taylor asks about you sometimes. Don't, I said firmly. I don't want to hear about her. You never do anything halfway, Ryan laughed. Before he left, he took my bike for a quick spin. When he returned, wide-eyed, he said, I need one of these. It's way faster than my wide glide, though I wouldn't want to take a sharp corner on it. After Ryan headed home, I spent the rest of the afternoon riding. Around 6:30 p.m., I stopped at another diner for a quick meal, a burger, onion rings, and a Dr. Pepper. From my seat, I watched my bike through the window as a group of girls parked nearby. One of them hopped on the chopper like it was a prop for her Instagram. I walked outside, surprising them. How'd you like it if I sat in your car with my feet on the dash? The girls scrambled off except for the one on the bike. Is this yours? She asked nonchalantly. Yes, I said, my irritation growing. Didn't anyone teach you not to touch other people's stuff? Relax, my mom and dad would have hotwired it, she shot back. How does it ride, anyway? And how does anyone sit on that tiny back seat? It rides fine, and I don't care about the back seat since no one rides there, I replied, annoyed. Now, get off my bike. Like I'd ruin it with my 105 pounds, she retorted, hopping off. And I wouldn't ride with you even if you begged. She sauntered into the diner, leaving me shaking my head. A few minutes later, the same girl approached me inside. I'm giving you another chance, she said with a smirk. You look like a lost puppy, and I love puppies. You can give me a ride home to apologize for being rude. Surprised but intrigued, I agreed. By the time I dropped her off, she handed me her number. Call me when you fix the seat. I'm Pam, by the way, she said, disappearing into her apartment. Not now, Pam, I said, cutting her off with a raised hand. We'll talk later, but not tonight. Are you okay to drive? I'm fine, but… Not tonight, I interrupted sharply, surprising both of us. I'll call you. Before she could reply, I got out of the car, glanced back to make sure she was okay, and disappeared into my building. Once inside, I slammed the door behind me, the sound echoing through the empty apartment. My keys hit the wall with a metallic clatter, and before I could stop myself, I shouted, God damn you, Carolyn. The name of X tore out of me, jagged and raw, like a wound being reopened. I ripped off my jacket and hurled it onto the couch, then turned to the wall. My fists found it, pounding relentlessly until my knuckles were raw and the drywall bore the evidence of my rage. Each hit seemed to echo the chaos in my mind. When I finally collapsed onto the floor, my breathing was ragged, my hands throbbing. Morning came too soon, dragging me from a restless haze. I woke around 6 a.m., still slumped on the floor of my workout room, the same clothes clinging to me like a second skin, drenched in stale sweat. My hands, swollen and bright red, pulsed with pain as I dragged myself to the kitchen. The ice water stung as I submerged them, alternating between hot and cold, trying to bring down the swelling. Hours passed, and I silently cursed my stupidity. Nothing was broken, but I wouldn't be hitting the heavy bag for a while. At least it's Sunday, I muttered to myself, staring at the stillness outside the window. A day to rest, unless someone came knocking. 2 weeks later, someone did. The knock came just as I was about to leave for work. When I opened the door, 2 uniformed officers stood there, their expressions neutral but unreadable. James, one of them asked. Yes, I replied cautiously. We need you to come down to the station and give a statement, the second officer said, his tone firm. There's been a formal complaint. I nodded, grabbed my jacket, and followed them to the patrol car. The next 2 hours were spent reliving the incident, explaining every detail. Yes, I knew Dan. No, I didn't know the other 2. Yes, Dan had started the fight in the club, and yes, they had attacked me outside. I told them about the witnesses, the bouncers, and how I had acted in self-defense. You almost put one guy in the ground, and the others on crutches for months, one officer said, his irritation barely contained. You didn't need to knock them out like that. I was afraid for my life, I said firmly. How was I supposed to know they didn't have weapons? I ended it fast to protect myself. I looked him square in the eye. You wouldn't understand unless you were there, I said evenly. Now, if you're not charging me, I'd like to go home. Ryan picked me up from the station, his face a mix of worry and disbelief. They say you knocked 2 guys out, he said as we drove. Not both, just one, I muttered, staring out the window. James, maybe you should talk to someone about your anger. I don't have anger issues, I snapped. Let it drop. Ryan sighed. Okay, I'm just worried about you. I know, I said quietly. It's been a long night. Just don't bring it up again. Pam's persistence was almost comical. Over the next 3 weeks, she left message after message, her voice playful but insistent. It's me, Pam. Just checking if you're free for dinner or a chat tomorrow. Oh, and starting next month, I'll be waiting on your doorstep instead of calling. Just a heads up. Good night. Persistent little thing, I muttered, deleting yet another voicemail. But her messages had an odd effect. Despite myself, I started to look forward to them. As the weeks passed, her voice became a thread that tethered me to something normal, something other than my own spiraling thoughts. The next day, Pam left another message. Since I haven't heard from you, I guess I'll be camping out on your doorstep next week. Don't worry, I'm bringing a pillow. See you Friday. She wouldn't, would she? By Thursday, the thought of seeing her again consumed me. My productivity at work nosedived, and I found myself staring at the clock. When I pulled into my building's parking lot that evening, my heart was racing. I sat in the car for an hour, watching the entrance, waiting, but there was no sign of her. Frustrated, I decided she'd been joking. As I walked toward my condo, I saw her. Pam was sitting on a pillow by my door, a smug smile on her face. Are you always this late? No wonder you don't have a life, she said, standing up and dusting off her jeans. If it weren't for a kind old lady, I'd still be waiting outside. Aren't you going to invite me in? She added, holding up the pillow like a trophy. I couldn't help but smile. Come on in, I said, unlocking the door. I nearly froze waiting for you, Pam said, tossing her jacket and pillow onto a chair. She made a beeline for the kitchen. What's for dinner? Give me a second, I said, hanging up my coat. I'm waiting, she said, hands on her hips. For what? I asked, starting the coffee. For an apology. Ignoring my calls? Leaving me with a million questions? My friends are asking about the psycho I'm dating who put 2 guys in the hospital. It didn't happen quite like that, I said. Yeah? They were taken away on stretchers. It could have been body bags, I replied calmly, sipping my coffee. You've got serious issues, James, Pam said, shaking her head. Let's talk about it over dinner. What's on the menu? I'll have to borrow something of yours, Pam teased, flashing a sly smile as she headed toward the bedroom. So, get moving if you want me in bed tonight. You can bare your soul tomorrow. With that, she carried our empty glasses to the kitchen, leaving me momentarily stunned. I grabbed her a toothbrush and showed her to the bathroom. Need anything else? You're so prepared, she said with a grin. This will do for tonight. I'll bring my own stuff next time. If there is a next time, she added playfully before stepping into the shower. While she showered, I laid out fresh towels and anything else she might need. Unable to resist, I joined her under the hot spray, the steam mixing with laughter and teasing touches. Our shower turned into something much more, leaving both of us breathless by the time we stumbled into bed. It had been over a year since I'd been with someone, and making love again felt like rediscovering a part of myself I thought was gone forever. Afterward, we lay tangled in each other's arms, listening to the rhythmic sound of our breathing. One more brownie, Pam murmured, barely awake. Then let's call it a night. We fell asleep together, though I stayed awake a little longer, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, I knew she'd want answers. After all, she'd opened up to me. But the thought of revisiting my past made my chest tighten. I didn't want her to leave, but I wasn't sure I could give her what she deserved. Damn you, Carolyn, my ex, I thought bitterly. Pam woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains, only to find the bed empty. A note rested on my pillow. Went for a run around the lake. If I'm not back, check the balcony and yell, "What kind of lunatic goes running in this weather?" Pam muttered, wrapping herself in a blanket. She checked outside and shivered. The frost on the railing made her shake her head in disbelief. Settling near the balcony doors, she waited. About 15 minutes later, she spotted me jogging toward the building. "Hey, sailor, you want to get laid?" she yelled, waving wildly. I laughed and waved back, picking up the pace. Once inside, I kicked off my running shoes and headed straight for the bathroom. "How long have you been up?" I asked as I passed her. "About 20 minutes. Isn't it freezing out there?" "Not if you keep moving. Running gives me a morning high," I replied, stepping into the shower. Pam followed, a mischievous glint in her eye. "You washed my back last night. I think it's my turn," she said, slipping in behind me. Between the shower and other activities, breakfast was delayed for over an hour. By the time we emerged, both of us were ravenous. "Coffee, tea, or hot chocolate?" I asked. "Coffee sounds perfect," Pam replied. "You've got options: pancakes, waffles, omelets, or fruit-filled crepes. But only sausage links for meat," I said with mock seriousness. "Sausage links only? Off with his head," she quipped, laughing. "Let's do crepes today and waffles tomorrow. Confident, aren't you?" I teased. "In myself? Absolutely. In you? Not so much," she shot back with a grin. As we ate, I felt the weight of what was coming. She'd want answers, and I didn't know how to explain everything without sounding weak or broken. "That was delicious," Pam said, rubbing her belly. "Any coffee left?" "Just enough for you," I replied, clearing the dishes. "So," she said, curling up on the couch, "do we start here or in bed?" "I'd prefer in bed, but I doubt I could focus if we were unclothed," I admitted. "Here, then. And no skipping details. We've got the whole weekend," she said, her gaze steady. "All right," I said, steeling myself. "What do you want to know?" "How long have you had such a hot temper?" Pam asked. "I don't have a temper," I said defensively. "Really?" she countered. "What about that night at the club?" "That was different," I said, my voice tight. "He had it coming. I'm just glad I stopped when I did." "I don't get it. Just tell me what I need to know," Pam urged, her tone soft but insistent. I took a deep breath and began. "Carolyn and I met at a party Nick and Lisa threw. Neither of us was looking for anything serious, but since Nick and Lisa were getting married, we kept crossing paths. Eventually, we started dating. I told Pam everything. How Carolyn's party girl lifestyle caused friction early on, how I had to pull her out of trouble when she flirted with the wrong guys, and how I finally drew a line, telling her we had to be exclusive or end things. Carolyn had agreed, and for a while, things were good. But by our 3rd year of marriage, things changed, I said, my voice dropping. I recounted the fantasies Carolyn had introduced: being tied up, role-playing, and, eventually, her request for a night at the club where I was relegated to fetching drinks while she danced provocatively with other men. "That's where Dan came in," I said grimly. "He treated me like a servant, calling me boy while he pawed at Carolyn. She went along with it, claiming it was all a joke. I wanted to leave, but she wouldn't, not until I said the safe word." Pam listened intently, her eyes wide as I described the humiliation I felt that night and the silence that followed when we returned home. "That night changed everything," I admitted. I told her no more fantasies, but she didn't listen. After dinner, Pam insisted I finish the story, her eyes locked on mine. "What happened next?" I hesitated, taking a long pull from my beer. "You sure you want to hear this?" "I'm not going anywhere, James," she said firmly. So, I told her about Carolyn's night to remember, how she tied me to the bed with leather straps, whispered promises in my ear, and then answered the doorbell. How Dan and his friend Tim had walked into my house like they owned it. How they laughed and taunted me while I lay helpless. I described the tape over my mouth, the sound of their laughter, and the horrifying realization of what was happening in the guest room. When Carolyn finally came in, babbling apologies and freeing me, it was too late. The damage was done, I said, my voice hollow. Dan had taken everything, my trust, my dignity, and left me with nothing but rage. Pam reached for my hand, her eyes brimming with tears. "James, I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I said quietly. "Just know that's why I went after Dan, and why I won't stop until I've dealt with Tim, too." Pam looked at me, fear creeping into her expression. "James, let it go. You're free of Carolyn now. Don't let this consume you." "I can't," I said, pacing. "They'll pay for what they did, starting with Tim." "James," she said firmly, stepping in front of me, "if you keep going down this path, you'll destroy yourself. You have a chance to start over. Don't throw it away." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time in a long while, I hesitated. Pam's words haunted me as I lay awake that night. "If you keep going down this path, you'll destroy yourself." She didn't understand. This wasn't just about what they'd done to me. It was about taking back control of my life. Dan had paid for his part, but Tim was still out there. And Carolyn? She deserved to feel the pain she'd inflicted, in ways she'd never see coming. The next morning, I woke with a sense of grim determination. Pam had left early, leaving a note. "Think about what I said. Call me if you want to talk." I folded the note and tucked it into my pocket, but I didn't call her. Not yet. By noon, I was in my car, parked across the street from Tim's gym. The private investigator I'd hired had given me a full rundown. Tim's schedule, his habits, even the kind of protein shakes he bought after workouts. I watched as he exited the gym, his smug grin reminding me of the taunts he'd thrown at me that night. My blood boiled, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't about rage. It was about precision. For the next 2 weeks, I shadowed Tim's every move. I wasn't sloppy. I made sure to vary my routine and keep my distance. He had a pattern, like most people: work, gym, drinks with friends, and then home to his overpriced condo. It was predictable, and predictability was a weakness. The plan came together in my mind, piece by piece. I didn't want him dead, not yet. That would be too easy. I wanted him to feel vulnerable, to know what it was like to have the world he controlled ripped away from him. It started small. One night, I followed him to the bar he frequented. While he was distracted, I slashed the tires on his truck. Nothing too obvious, just enough to strand him and ruin his night. The next day, I sent an anonymous tip to his employer, mentioning irregularities in his financial records. I had no idea if he was skimming money or not, but that wasn't the point. The point was planting doubt. Within days, I saw the cracks begin to form. Tim showed up at the gym later than usual, his usual cocky swagger replaced by agitation. He argued with the front desk staff when his credit card was declined, then stormed out in a rage. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it was a start. Carolyn was next. She had been emailing me relentlessly, alternating between apologies and accusations. "You abandoned me. I miss you. Dan lied to me." I ignored her, but each message fueled the fire inside me. If Tim was going to feel the weight of my vengeance, Carolyn was going to drown in it. I started with her reputation. Carolyn worked as a project manager for a mid-sized marketing firm. Through some creative digging, I found out she'd been cutting corners on expense reports, charging personal purchases to the company card. An anonymous tip to HR was all it took to start the wheels of corporate justice turning. Next, I reached out to a mutual acquaintance who owed me a favor. Within days, rumors began circulating about Carolyn at work, whispers of affairs with clients, questionable behavior at company events. By the time she realized what was happening, her once perfect reputation was in tatters. But I wasn't done. The final blow came 2 weeks later when I sent Carolyn a package. Inside was a single leather strap, the same one she'd used to tie me up on that cursed night. Alongside it was a letter. "Do you remember the safe word, Carolyn? Because I do. You'll never use it again." I heard nothing from her after that, but I knew the message had landed. Tim, on the other hand, was unraveling beautifully. He'd lost his job, thanks to the investigation at work. His landlord had filed for eviction after weeks of unpaid rent. When I followed him to the gym one last time, he looked like a shadow of the man who had walked into my house that night. I cornered him in the parking lot as he left, catching him off guard. "Tim," I said, my voice calm but cold. He froze, his eyes wide. "James? What the hell do you want?" "Justice," I replied simply. Before he could react, I slammed him against his truck. He struggled, but I'd been waiting for this moment for too long to let him get the upper hand. You remember what you did to me? To my wife? I hissed, pressing my forearm into his throat. Look, man, it wasn't my idea. Tim gasped. Dan planned everything. I didn't even. Save it, I snapped, releasing him just enough to let him breathe. You had your fun that night. Now it's my turn. I didn't hit him. That would have been too easy. Instead, I left him with a promise. I've taken everything from you, Tim. Your job, your home, your reputation. And if you ever try to rebuild, I'll be there to tear it down again. You don't get to move on. Not until I say so. He crumpled to the ground as I walked away, my heart pounding. That night, I sat on my balcony with a beer in hand, staring out at the lake. Pam had called again, but I didn't pick up. I couldn't face her, not yet. What would she think of me now? The revenge had been satisfying, but it hadn't filled the void. The pain was still there, gnawing at me like an open wound. I thought about Carolyn, about the life we built and destroyed, about Tim and Dan, and the chaos they'd left behind. And I thought about Pam, the one person who had tried to pull me back from the edge. As the sun set, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I'd call Pam. But tonight, I'd let the darkness consume me one last time. My birthday's in 2 weeks. By then, I want you gone, out of this city. If I find you still here, I'll make sure you never touch another woman again. Got it? Tim nodded frantically, his fear palpable. 2 weeks, I said coldly before walking out the door. One down, one to go. For $8,800, I secured the perfect birthday gift to ensure Carolyn would never forget me. The day before, I received a confirmation email. It's all set for 9:30 a.m. On my birthday, I went to work with a spring in my step. Coworkers wished me a happy birthday, and someone even brought cake. That evening, my boss treated me to dinner, and I didn't get home until almost 8 p.m. When I walked into my condo, the answering machine's light blinked furiously, 25 messages. I deleted them all without listening, grabbed a cold Corona from the fridge, and sat down to wait. The pounding on the door came just before 9 p.m., sharp and furious. I took a deep breath, savoring the moment, before calmly opening the door. You bastard! Carolyn screamed, tears streaming down her face as Nick held her back. Good evening, streetwalker. How's life treating you? I replied, my tone as casual as if we were old friends meeting for coffee. How could you? She sobbed, her voice breaking. How could you send that video to my parents? To my friends? What video? I asked innocently, leaning against the doorframe. Maybe if you describe it, I'll know which one you mean. You know exactly what I mean, she shrieked. The tape. The one labeled Carolyn Moore, street hooker and cheater. I crossed my arms, my expression hardening. Oh, that one. Not only did I see it, I lived it. I rolled up my sleeves, revealing the scars on my wrists. See these? They're my daily reminder of what you did to me. Carolyn crumpled, her sobs growing louder. I'm sorry, she whimpered. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Sorry? I sneered. Sorry you planned your little fantasy of screwing other men while your husband was tied up like an idiot? Sorry you let them record it? Or sorry that everyone now knows exactly who you are? James, I can't let her get away with it, Pam, I growled, pacing the room like a caged animal. She has to pay for what she did. Pam stood by the door, her arms crossed and her face a mix of sadness and frustration. James, this obsession is consuming you. It's not justice you're after. It's revenge, and if you go through with this, we're done. I stopped in my tracks, staring at her with wild eyes. Then leave, I muttered darkly. Pam grabbed her coat, pausing for a moment in the doorway. Don't call me when this is over. Goodbye, James. Turning back to Carolyn, I pulled out a manila envelope. If anything on that tape isn't true, I'll issue a retraction. If not, it is what it is. And just to end things on a high note, here's a little gift for you. I thrust the envelope into her trembling hands. Divorce papers. Signed, notarized, and delivered. If you don't mind, I've got things to do. The love was decent, but the marriage was garbage. With that, I shut the door and leaned against it, letting the weight of finality settle over me. It was done. Carolyn's humiliation spread like wildfire. I had hired a hacker to ensure the tape reached her parents, her close friends, and a few strategic recipients. It was also uploaded to 2 adult sites, bringing in enough ad revenue to cover the hacker's fee. I could have gone further. Her workplace, her church, but I decided to let her stew in her personal disgrace. Carolyn threatened legal action, but the tape had been routed through overseas servers, leaving no trail. Within 3 weeks, I received a terse email from her parents. "We're sorry. We never knew." Some friends tried to apologize, but I ignored them. Carolyn quit her job and moved out of state, vanishing like a ghost. At work, my coworkers never mentioned the tape, though I caught a few lingering stares. It didn't matter. They saw me as the victim, and that was enough. 2 months later, Nick called me. "I saw the tape," he admitted. "I'll be honest, Steve. I might have done the same thing in your shoes. But for the sake of my family, we need to keep some distance for now." "I get it," I replied, my tone neutral. "Take care, Nick." Pam was gone, too. I'd pushed her away, and I didn't blame her. For a while, I drowned myself in work and the occasional date. For months later, I ran into her at a downtown club. She was with friends, but eventually worked her way over to me. "James," she said softly, "how have you been?" "Never better," I replied curtly, though my heart tightened at the sight of her. "I heard what happened, and I saw part of the tape online," she admitted, her voice hesitant. I cut her off, my tone sharp. "You judged me without knowing the whole story. You thought I was just a bitter ex trying to ruin someone's life." Pam's face fell, but she didn't look away. "Maybe we could talk sometime?" "Pam," I said, shaking my head, "I really cared about you, but it wasn't enough. You've got too much baggage for me now." I glanced toward my table, where Tammy, a stunning redhead, was waiting. "My date's coming back. Take care of yourself." Pam nodded, her expression unreadable. "If only things had been different," she murmured as I walked away. I hugged Tammy and whispered in her ear, stealing a quick kiss. As we left the club, I felt Pam's gaze lingering on me. For a brief moment, I hesitated, wondering what might have been. But the moment passed, and I let it go. "You've gone too far, James," Nick said, his voice serious. "Have you even watched the tape yourself?" "No," I snapped,